Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. My name is Trainer Chip Ritchie, joined here as always by my co-host Azul GG. What's going on, Azul? How we doing? How's your past week been, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Been busy, unfortunately, not making content this week. Got some testing in for Worlds, and worked on some other stuff around the house. So yeah, been busy with that kind of stuff. But good week overall. Solid. Getting excited to head to uh, head to London a little bit less than a week now, or about a week now. I think I leave Monday. So yeah, about a week now. Head to London. So I'm excited for that. How about you, Chip? How's your week been?
Week's been pretty good. Just doing a lot of preparing for the baby. A lot of putting the last few things together for the nursery. Last few packages coming in of things we've ordered online that we needed still. Um, yeah, just getting it all ready. Brooke will be 37 weeks this week, so that's full term, which means 40 weeks is like expected due date is supposed to be September 1st, but once you're 37 weeks, it could be any time. Could be baby
Any
time.
moment.
So it's pretty wild. We'll see what happens. I think Brooke is kind of hoping that he stays in there and cooks a little bit longer, as long as possible. And then we'll, cross the bridge when we get there when it's been 40 weeks. But yeah, we're excited, man. It's becoming more and more real by the day, for sure.
Can
So
only imagine.
we're looking forward to it though. It's a very exciting time. But we're not here to talk about babies and boring stuff like that. We're here to talk about the real important stuff of life, the Pokemon trading card game. And we got plenty to talk about this week. Of course, Worlds is coming up in just about a week and a half. Like Azul was mentioning, he's getting ready to travel out soon. We'll kick off the episode this week, though, talking about the Pokemon trading card game live. There was a little bit of an update from the Pokemon Company, a letter to the community. So we'll definitely read that and give our thoughts on that. There's also a little bit of a survey. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. We want to talk about an online tournament that took place last week. We actually wanted to talk about this last week on last week's episode, but just didn't end up having enough time. There was a lot going on last week. So yeah, we'll talk about this online tournament that happened, the Tournament of Champions that really kind of ended up being a little bit of a flop for what it could have been, and I think what the organizers were hoping it was going to be. We'll, of course, have Guess That Flavor Text, everyone's favorite segment. I loved reading all the YouTube comments last week of people saying they got their first flavor text right, and Azul just couldn't quite get there. But it'll be my turn to guess this week, so we'll see what happens. And then we'll close out this week's episode with our World's meta prediction, meta discussion. We'll give our thoughts on the different decks, all the top, 10 or so decks that we think could show up at the World Championships in numbers that we think people will choose to play, how we feel about them personally, if we could see ourselves playing them, if we were in a certain player's position day one, day two, all those types of things. And we'll also be pulling a few questions from our listeners that we got over on Twitter. We'll be doing some more questions next week. So if you have a question in regards to the World Championships, be sure to interact over on the Twitter. Leave us a question, or you can leave a question in the comments down below. Azul, you ready to hop into this thing?
Yeah, let's jump into it. And we're starting off with talking about PTCG Live, a pretty big, I think you said a little bit of news. I think this is a big deal.
Fair.
Let's talk about PTCG Live in general. So it released back, the beta released back in
I
March.
think so,
Is that right?
yes.
March, yeah. Exclusively to Canada and everyone else and everyone who moved to Canada during that
Via a VPN.
via VPN.
It was cold
Um,
up in Canada, bro. I mean, it was for
it
me
was
at least.
cool.
Was it cold up there for you? You see any mooses? Moose? I think it's
The
meese.
Meese.
Is it moose?
Yeah.
I
No, it's
think the
moose.
plural of moose is moose.
It is moose. Yes, I've been through this before. It's not meese, although I do use that term. I was actually just speaking about that. So when I was in Hawaii, there was a lot of mongoose, they're called the plural of mongoose is mangeese, and I was
Mooses
joking
and
around about
Mises.
it. Yeah, so I was joking around about that because of the moose meese thing. When we got there, but then at some point we kind of looked it up, and yeah, the plural of mongoose is mangeese, which I don't know, just like literally just went through my head right there when I was in Hawaii. But there was mankeys everywhere. Like they were everywhere. They were like squirrels.
That's
Um,
wild.
yeah, there's a lot of mankeys. They're very small too. They're smaller than I thought too. But yeah, so PTCG Live releases in March, exclusive to Canadians, and anyone else who wanted to VPN to Canada. So not too exclusive. And had a lot of issues on release, a lot of issues. And I think the biggest thing for me back then was the fact that they took your cards, they took your PTCGO collection, they confidently took your PTCGO collection, limiting, extremely limiting your way to play the Pokemon trading card game, not online, but like, on your computer or
Digitally,
whatever,
yeah.
digitally, and then putting you into a pretty bad experience. It was just not a good experience, right? I think that was the biggest thing for me is they just took your cards. And they haven't stopped doing that. They've still been taking people's collections, removing them instead of, just giving everyone an unlocked account who wants to play in the beta, which is what they probably should do. They're pretty invested into this route now, so maybe they just have to kind of go with it at this point. So that was my biggest thing when it first released. And of course, everyone had their own issues, with the game. Mine was the bugs not being fixed enough, the fact that they took everyone's collections and kind of limited your ability to play the game, but then not putting you in an experience where you don't even want to play the game anymore, right? Um, and that's the way it's been for a while. I haven't been on PTC. When was the last time you logged into PTCG Live? I haven't logged into PTCG Live in.
Yeah.
I was maybe invested into it for like a month. I think so, March to April. I don't think I lasted a full month. I
It was
forget how long I
around the
lasted.
same for me. I did just log back in a couple days ago because on the survey, which we'll talk about here in a moment, which I did fill out the survey, Azul filled it out as well.
Yep.
It asks what your trainer account level was on PTCG Live, and I couldn't remember exactly what I was, so I just logged back in to check it out, and I did not miss it. I was
Have things changed at
happy.
all?
Well, I logged back in and I got a ton of rewards because I had never claimed my battle pass rewards from that I had earned or whatever, I think, and the battle pass like ended up ending from that early beta period. Also got my ranked ladder rewards as well. But then I looked at like the new battle pass and the new ranked ladder rewards, and I think all of the rewards were new stuff, and then also you could still get the stuff from the last month's or the last set cycles rewards program. So like the big reward at the end of the battle pass was a Arceus. Was it the deck box or was it the sleeves? I can't remember exactly.
It
It
was
was
the whole deck. It was the whole deck, wasn't it? Or no, it was the sleeves and the deck
it
box.
was
I
a
think. Yeah, I think you're
cosmetic
right.
for sure. I think it was
Yeah,
or maybe it was a shaman coin or something like that. But whatever it was, it's in addition to like the Palkia coin or the tier 70 reward on the current battle pass, which I thought was kind of funny. But anyway, yeah. So people, had a bunch of problems with the game. One of my biggest issues with the game is like it felt so clunky to
yeah, it's
play.
slow.
The games took a lot longer. The actions did not feel as snappy as they did on
The animations.
PTCGO. The animations were terrible. And honestly, just graphically, the game doesn't look the best to me, which is, I mean, kind of a big deal, right? It's like the
Yeah,
most important thing is that it functions and plays well. And then subsequent to that it should be attractive and look good. But I honestly think like it was Andrew Mahone, I think, tweeted out something a few months ago that had a screenshot of Magic Online. It had a screenshot of Hearthstone. It had a screenshot of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel game and how these boards look just amazing. And they've got like animations and backgrounds, like just all kinds of stuff going on. And then the PTCG Live board just is plain. And so it's just really disappointing for how much we love the Pokemon trading card game for the beta to have gone as poorly as it did, and bugs did not get fixed as quickly as we were hoping they would. That was like my big hope with it being now an in-house development process as opposed to being developed by a third-party studio, which was Direwolf Digital, who develops the Pokemon trading card game online, which is the game that pretty much everyone has gone back to playing now. um I was hoping that since it was an in-house development process, it was being developed by people at the Pokemon Company International, that bugs would get fixed in a day. Like it would be so fast. And then apparently Silene was bugged from the day it came out in Astral Radiance, and it was bugged for 2 months. And this
yeah.
is like a super relevant card. It got top 4 at the North American International Championships. People are trying to test for Worlds, and they can't use this really important card. And then there's been a ton of other bugs that have popped up over the last couple months, like people being able to just instantly win games by There was like some exploit where you could queue in with just one basic Pokemon that was like an expanded legal Pokemon or something
Yeah.
like that onto the standard ladder, and the game wouldn't work. And so it would just give you the win because it's like the game didn't know what to do. It's like, okay, this person doesn't have a legal deck. Here you go. Here's your ladder points.
I wonder if the other person got the loss, or
I,
was it? I wonder if it was win-win or like win-loss.
that's a good question, honestly. If it just gave both people the 20 battle pass or
Yeah.
whatever, not battle pass, ranked ladder points, but
And
also,
all
that was
these
another
things.
thing that was a disappointment to me was that the ranked ladder was not really a ranked
Yeah.
ladder. It's just like if you won, you got 20 points. If you lost 20 points. And that's just not how a ranked system works. That's just playing. It's pretty much the same as PTCGO.
Yeah, and even when you got up to the highest rank, they didn't give you a number like, oh, your rank 100 or 200. And it does definitely come down to when there's no like ELO behind it. It is like a very basic ELO system, I guess, right? Like you win, you get some, you lose some, but it's
Right.
not based on your opponent's current rank, which it should be, especially once you get to that highest rank. Hearthstone is basically you win your way up to Hearthstone is basically like the current rank system in on PTCG Live, but when you get to legend, that's where it turns into ELO, where it turns into
Right.
like you have a number, and if you beat someone who's like rank 1, you'll get a bunch of rating, or you'll bunch of jump up a bunch of ranks. And if you play against someone worse than you or equal to you, it'll be like less or whatever. If you beat them, you get less.
And you
So
know what's crazy
um,
about that is the exact way that the ranking works for the Pokemon video game. That's the way the ranking works for Pokemon Unite. That's the way the ranking works for Pokemon Go. Even all of
yeah,
these games have a system in place just like that, where once you get to the highest rank in the video game, it's like Master Ball tier. In Unite, it's also Master Ball tier. And I think in Pokemon Go it's like Legend or something like that, which I think is similar to what it is in League of Legends and stuff like that, is like the highest rank. Um, it tells you an actual number in
yeah,
Unite and in the Pokemon video game. It tells you your actual rank. You are 2000th in the world, or you are 157th, or you are first in the world at this time. And if you play someone who has a higher rank than you lose more points. If you play someone who, or like depending on if you win or lose, right? Like the rank of your opponent affects your outcome. And then in Pokemon Go, it doesn't tell you like what number you are in the world, but it shows you what your ELO rating is. So it'd be like 3030 or something like that.
yeah.
And then you would see your opponent's rating of 3045. So they have a little bit higher of a rating than you. And so your number would go up and down based on that. So you don't see like an actual rank, but you see a number there. So it's
Wait
crazy
for
that we have
what is
that
that?
in all these other Pokemon games, but not in the
Yeah,
Pokemon TCG.
yeah, yeah, and that's what makes something a ranked ladder. What we have on PTCG Live is not. It's just not a ranked ladder. It just isn't. You can't even see what you're ranked up against, who you're ranked up against. And I'm sure there is. I'm sure on their end they can look at who is the person with the highest, who the most points on the thing. But when we can't compare ourselves to them, it's not a ranked ladder. So that's something they need to fix. Like they have to
Sure.
fix that system. It has to become a ranked ladder. And they can't fix it by removing a ranked ladder. You need a ranked ladder in like a game like this. You just need it. You just need to have a ranked ladder in the online play of a game like this. It just needs to happen. So they need to get a real ranked ladder on the game. They can't just make it all go to casual. There needs to be a ranked ladder. And all the other like problems we've talked about, like I said, they all kind of this goes back to my initial point of what I thought was the worst about PTC Live. They all kind of compound when it's like, oh, you need a test for worlds and your side lean's bugged and this and this and this. And that all kind of compounds when it's like, oh, but I migrated all my cards over to PTCG Live and I can't go play. Now I can't be like, you know what? This game, it's trash. The bugs are too much. I don't want to handle with the visuals. I don't like them. I'm going to go back and play on PTCGO. You just can't do that because they took your cards, right? So that kind of like compounds everything to just make it the experience that much worse. That they were comfortable taking people's collections, and then if they had kept up with it and they fix the bugs fast, make the game flow better, which I think is a big thing for both of us. Is like, yeah, the game just takes so long on PTCG Live compared to PTCGO, and PTCGO has its own problems with that, where it's like things are just too slow. So it needs to be faster than PTCGO, but it was a lot. It was a lot for sure, but it did give us some hope today. I'm sure you have it pulled up so that people on the
Yeah.
YouTube can see it here, Chip. So if you want to go ahead and and read off that whatever they posted over there, or start talking about that, go for it.
Yeah, so pretty much all these things that we've talked about led to a mass exodus from the game. Everyone who migrated their accounts to PTCG Live, for the most part, most people just don't play the game anymore. They migrated their cards, and so they just haven't been playing Pokemon online, or they've been a few people have stuck around and suffered, I think, and then several people just have gone back to PTCGO. Yourself, you started a new account, got a bunch of new cards. There's plenty of people who have done that same thing because the experience was so bad. And there's been plenty of outcry from the community. All of the top creators, it feels like at this point, have mentioned how, pointed out the problems with the game, because they just are problems. It's not even a matter of opinion. There's just things that are
Yeah.
wrong with the game. So
Yeah, it's like
finally, what's that?
when you said when you said you didn't like the visuals, it's okay if like one person
Yeah.
doesn't like something, but when everyone is like, no, the visuals are bad, the bugs need to be fixed faster. Like it's not an opinion, which is like some of the ridiculous responses I saw from people defending PTCG Live. It's like when it's almost a universal agreement, when you're the minority defending them, it's just wrong. Like there's something wrong with the product. The product needs to be better. Um, and it just needs to be, even like going back to what you said as well, it's like for you felt like, if it's, as long as it's functioning, that's one thing, even if it doesn't look visually good. But I think for something like PTCG Live, you need both. It needs to be visually good, and it needs to consistently function. They have to keep up with bugs or glitches or whatever, unless you want it to just be a flash in the pan. But with how bad the beta's gone, they don't even have that as an option on release anymore, because no one's interested in the game anymore. No one cares when it's going to release. They've lost there's no hype behind it at all anymore. It was so hyped when it first released. There's no hype. There's nothing to look forward to. So they need both to have this thing like be a success and like grow at this point. It has to be visually good. It has to be, the also the gameplay has to be flowing as well. So a lot to work on
So
still.
all these things eventually now, 5 months after the initial beta release, has led to a letter to the community. And this is not the first letter to the community from the developers. They actually gave us a letter back in May, at the end of May, May 24th, just kind of addressing some of the issues and where they were standing. But today they released some new information. We're going to read through this, give our kind of thoughts. It's about 5 paragraphs, so we'll kind of break between each paragraph if necessary, and kind of give our input and thoughts and stuff. So I'll just read through it here. Letter to the community. Dear Pokemon TCG fans, thank you all for providing us with your thoughts, feedback, and support during this stage of the Pokemon TCG Live Limited Beta. Today, we'd like to share some of the ways we're prioritizing development based on the experiences you've shared with us and with each other in the community. I love the fact that they are wanting to, like, this is great. Communication between developer and community is necessary. The fact that this is the second communication in 5 months is terrible.
Yeah, it's not great. They
They
could be
interact a little
doing,
bit more on the forums, I think,
yeah.
but like as far as like, especially with how many problems there have been, for this to just be the second address is not great.
Yeah, they could definitely do more as far as that goes. But I like I hate giving. I don't like to give them credit. I don't like to give Pokemon in general credit for stuff like this, because when you compare it to other card games or just like the world, how much the world has evolved in general, Pokemon is really slow with stuff. We've had problems with like tournaments being announced like super super late, like after Worlds has happened, and we haven't even had. We didn't plan to like talk about it or anything, but like Worlds has like we don't have no idea what's happening with the next season, right? We have
Yeah.
nothing has come out yet. They were getting better about it, but Pokemon is generally just really slow with this stuff. So I'm not going to give them credit for them releasing this statement. It does show that they are listening, which is good, and they are actually going to. It's not just listening. They didn't just like put out this thing. It's like, okay, guys, we hear you. Then they say that they do that a couple more times, and they release the same product that they've been working on this whole time. They said we hear you, and we are making changes. So that's good, right? It's a step in the right direction. But I don't want to give them like too much credit for doing this. Like you said, there should be more communication.
A point of feedback we've often received is that players feel the game board layout is too limiting compared with a physical Pokemon TCG match. We've adjusted how cards are presented to players in landscape mode to make for more intuitive gameplay. You can see some of these changes in the example below, taken from the version of the game we're currently testing. I'll just make this full screen real quick for the YouTube people to kind of see. This is the original TCG Live Layout. We see the two avatars on the left side. the cards, once they get put in the active spot, really are super small, especially when you compare it to PTCGO. And then also when you bench Pokemon, they only show the picture. They don't show the text on the actual Pokemon card once it hits the bench. And then in the updated graphics they've shown today, there is a total change to the way the board looks itself. The white subway tiles are gone from the middle of the field, replaced by black and gray subway tiles. But they have filled the space in quite a bit more. The avatars are also noticeably absent. So I don't know if that means they're planning to do away with them completely or if they just won't appear all the time on screen. And whenever they get to the gameplay section, you can see that the cards look slightly bigger. I still think that the active Pokemon is way smaller than it is on PTCGO. So it's still, you
Yeah.
got to hover over it to read, which you're going to have to do regardless. It is better though. It is better. And you can
Yeah.
actually see the
There's space
full,
there.
you can still see you can see the full card on the bench. It's not just the picture with the HP number. You see the full Pokemon. But if you notice, there is still a ton of dead, unused space to the left and right of the cards. Just so much of the battlefield is empty.
Yeah, what if they just like bumped the discard pile? What if they just like bumped the discard pile and deck, and then the prize cards up, and then made the bench bigger?
Yeah.
What if they just did that?
I think that
And
would
then
look pretty good. And it also makes me wonder, too, based on what this says. We've adjusted how the cards are presented to players in landscape mode to make for more intuitive gameplay. This game is being designed for desktop and mobile.
so
And
that means this is just the way it looks for desktop then, right?
right, exactly. So I wonder how this is going to look on mobile because the way they've been designing it for mobile is to play it in vertical mode. I would love it if they would just go to the horizontal option. That's how all other card games are played on mobile is in landscape mode, with like your phone being held horizontally. I guess they want people to be able to play it with one hand while they're walking around or something, but that's just not how card games usually function on mobile.
You're not going to be walking around while you play a card game anyways. You just like stop and think, and like
Yeah,
there's too much going on. It's not
it's a
like
strategy game. It's not Pokemon Go,
Candy
right?
Crush.
Candy
Yeah, it's not
Crush.
Pokemon Go. Yeah, unless you're battling someone. But even if you're battling someone in Pokemon Go, you could do that while you're walking. Like, yeah, there's a lot of they could make the
Yeah,
like
bro, you
even
just
from
gotta
this
tap.
picture. Yeah, even from this picture, they could make the active Pokemon bigger. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure they're working on it. I'm sure they're testing stuff. And then also, we need to be able to switch the uh uh what's it called? I'm thinking of the perspective of our opponent's field.
Oh
Like we
yeah.
need to be able to flip it around. It looks we like if they're trying to at all capture like the transition from IRL to this and back and forth, like just give it as an option. Let us like go to settings and click flip opponent's perspective and just like a little setting. Maybe you can even have this be the default where you just like are looking at the Remoraid and he's like looking the other way. But give us the option to go to the settings and click flip opponent's perspective, and then it makes their cards face us. So the Remoraid
Right.
and all the bench Pokemon would flip around the other way. Just give it as an option. It doesn't need to be. They can be both ways. You can have the default be the weird way, but give us the option to flip around because it's just so jarring as
Yeah.
someone who has been playing as long as I have. But anyone who comes from IRL and plays the way you play, it's just going to be jarring and it's just off putting. Like just let us flip the Pokemon around.
Yeah,
It
so
can't be a hard setting to add.
for our audio listeners, what Azul's talking about here is like the opponent's active Pokemon. The card is facing you as opposed to facing your opponent, right? So it looks like if your opponent was theoretically sitting across from you on the other side of your screen, their card would be upside down, which is normally how a Pokemon is confused. That's how you designate that a Pokemon is confused in the
Yeah, that
Pokemon
as well makes it weird.
TCG. So it makes it confusing there. I guess maybe that's what they're going for. Make it, the confusion is confusing, but it is definitely something that it should be the other way for sure to make it more streamlined between the real game and the digital game. So let's get back into the
Yeah.
letter here. This future layout update will give players a complete view of the cards and options available to help inform and improve strategy in play. This also includes reworked card sizes and better use of the board's empty space, so matches feel more active while making more information available to the player. So, I mean, I think that a section of this statement here says that they rework card sizes to better use the board's empty space. It's like
I mean, a little
the
bit.
smallest amount of empty space that was present went away. There is still so much empty space in this field. Um,
Yeah. Now the avatars are gone too, so like I mean, they were no one wanted them to be taking up space, but they were taking up space. They were they were
exactly.
doing
So
it.
now it feels even more empty almost.
Yeah.
In addition to layout changes, the development team has significantly emphasized improving the overall visual polish of Pokemon TCG Live while in a match. Our goal is to create an in match experience that's visually unique and appealing while also including elements of what we and our fans love about the world of Pokemon. Your ongoing feedback on all these significant changes is critical in helping us, and we look forward to sharing how else we'll be rolling out adjustments and improvements in service of that goal.
All right. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, hopefully that is something they do. That's what they say they're gonna do, and I guess I do believe them. They want to do it, right? I mean, there's some stuff when I look at this that like, I mean, like with the new layout. For those of you that aren't on the YouTube channel, can't really see it, but the boxes that your discard pile, your decks sit in, and your bench sits in, they feel weird with the new background. So I assume that's a change they're going to make. Is they're going to make it everything kind of come together a little bit more because it feels like it's floating above the play mat, like the play area, which is weird. Um, and I mean, I just rewatched the video here. One thing they need to like do, I don't know why this is a thing. Once again, talking about like gameplay being slow. Why do you draw your cards not at the same time as your opponent on PTCG or PTCG Live? That makes no sense. I just like rewatched like the
That's
video
a
of the
good
new
point.
layout, and you draw your cards first, and your opponent draws them second. Just have your opponent draw their cards. Why is that a delay in getting into the game? Is your opponent drawing their cards not at the same time as you? That's ridiculous. I mean, all these little things, like it all builds up. Like this is not that big of a deal if that was the only thing wrong with PTCG Live, but especially when it's been such a weird thing on PTCGO for so long. Like, it's no reason for it to be on PTCGO either. Like, why are we drawing our cards separately? Let's just draw them both at the same time. Let's cut that half a second out, you know? Um, but we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I don't want to give them too much benefit here.
And then
Too much. Yeah.
back to the letter
Go ahead.
again. We've got while we've been making progress on visual and practical improvements to the game board, we've also been focusing on the responsiveness of the game overall, which is something you and I both think is an issue right now. In a
Yeah.
recent update, we rolled out some changes to the in-game store to significantly improve the time it takes for actions like redeeming booster packs or making purchases. This work will extend to other functions of Pokemon TCG Live to ensure that the game feels quick and seamless both in and out of matches. So the changes that they're talking about specifically to the store right now, like it was still a little clunky, like navigating all those menus, and then also like redeeming code cards did take a while. I could actually never get redeeming code cards to work with my webcam. I always had to enter them manually. That just might be a me problem. It also doesn't work with PTCGO, so I've troubleshooted everything I can. Just a regular old webcam doesn't work. Who knows why? um, but but yeah, I mean, it's like one of the biggest issues that you and I both mentioned was just the overall snappiness and
Yeah.
how the game feels, and it feels like that's something they're aware of and they're addressing. And then to
Yeah.
help us in collecting your feedback, we ask that you please consider taking time to fill out our survey. And they leave a link to a survey about the Pokemon TCG Live, which I filled out, Azul filled out, and I'll also leave it I'll leave like a comment down below here on the YouTube channel for those of you who want to fill it out. And I really would encourage people to fill out this survey. Take your time. It does take a little while. It's about a 15-ish minute survey. But there's plenty of space to leave your feedback. And I would just really encourage people to give their honest and thoughtful feedback about what their experiences have been like with PTCG Live, the good ones, the bad ones, whatever it may be. But hopefully, I mean, the fact that they're like gathering this information shows that they want to listen and they want to address the issues that most commonly come up. So please be sure to give your full and in-depth thoughts and definitely do the survey. The more people who do it, the better.
Yeah, I was pretty brutal, so there's no way you could be like, if you're afraid about being mean, like you probably
You
were
won't
worse
be
than
as mean as
me.
Azul was.
Yeah, so don't worry, they won't think of yours as being the mean survey that they read over or whatever. So you'll be good on that.
As far as surveys go as well, it was a little bit confusing taking it because some of the questions ask about PTCG Live specifically, or like your opinions on how things worked. And some of the questions just talk about the Pokemon TCG. Like, do you enjoy playing the Pokemon trading card game? Well, I mean, yes. Do I enjoy playing TCG Live? No, but that's not what you're asking me. It was a little confusing there that some of the questions were not about TCG Live specifically, but more just about the actual Pokemon card game.
Yeah, those questions. There's a couple other ones that felt a little almost like leading. Like I was like, well, I can't not put that this was positive or like you know what I'm saying. But I think the reason that had to be is that they wanted to get the opinion of people who this was their first time playing Pokemon, was playing in the beta, the PTCG Live beta. I'm sure was like they wanted that, but I feel like that's so irrelevant to PTCG Live. Some of the stuff with like progression through, getting cards to be able to play real decks and so on, like real competitive decks, is like reasonable questions. But asking if they enjoy Pokemon, like TPC, we all know TPC has nothing to do with making the game and like constructing the formats and all that stuff, right? Like that's nothing to do with. Like they like these survey answers aren't going to affect what Japan decides to put out for cards, right? So like who cares?
Right.
Like I guess like asking asking some of the questions. Some of the questions were like, how do you feel about the battle pass, or is that what they call it? Do they call it a battle pass?
Yeah.
Yeah, the battle pass, like general progression of like getting cards, the starter decks, like all that makes sense, right? Because you want people to be enjoying the game without having to work hard for their cards or work too hard or have it be an unenjoyable experience. So those made sense. But yeah, there were some general questions that kind of felt like, like I said, they felt kind of leading, like they wanted some positive answers out of the survey. But I was actually surprised when I got that first question. I think of them comparing it to PTCGO. They were like, "All right, have you played PTCGO?" And if your answer was yes, and I think that they were like, "What did you like more?" And they were like, they gave you some pretty decent options, to be pretty honest about it. And like I said, mine was pretty brutal. But I hope that quite a few more people do go out of their way to take the survey. I'm sure there's quite a few more people out there. I saw a reply to their initial tweet. One of the tweets that someone replied to their tweet when they kind of put out the survey on the Play Pokemon TCG Twitter or whatever was, I felt mean. They were like, I felt mean with my survey response. I was like, I
Yeah.
felt kind of mean. But yeah, don't be afraid to be honest, for sure, because we want change. We got to make sure that they know we want change for sure, and ideally as unanimously as possible, right? We got to be in
Yeah.
this together as much as we can if you do truly feel that way. So make sure, no matter how you feel, to go ahead and take the survey for sure.
And the final line here is: your perspectives, thoughts, and considerations about the game have all been invaluable to us in guiding what will come next to Pokemon TCG Live. We encourage you to continue sharing that sentiment and help us reach our goal of creating the best digital Pokemon TCG experience possible, from the Pokemon trading card game live development team. And that is what our hope is as well, that PTCG Live can be the best digital TCG, Pokemon TCG experience. There's a long way to go for it to get there, but
Yeah.
there is so much potential for this game, because the game of Pokemon, like this digital card game, is based off the real card game. And the real card game, like the mechanics, the rules, the interactions, it's a good game. It really
Yeah.
is. And so when you have like such a strong base of a foundation of a game that's been around for over 20 years, there's just so much potential there. And it just hasn't lived up to it yet. But it
Yeah.
sounds like the team over there is dedicated to trying to make it happen. I hope.
Yeah. I mean, it's tied to the biggest brand in the world as well, Pokemon, right? So like, it's got a lot going for it. There's got
Yeah.
a lot going for it, and I think it was just like at the end of it all, where we are now is where we are. But I think it was like the reason there was such a big outrage is just it was just like a culmination of a lot of just bad situations altogether, right? The beta was bad. We've been waiting years for a new client. We've been wanting a new client. I think it was coming up, like leading up to the point where they actually like got announced. Was like this is the most I'd ever heard everyone talking about. Okay, are we going to get a new client? Will we ever get a new client? And then it released the beta release, and everyone was hyped. It was like, oh my gosh, they gave us a new client. And then the beta actually came out, and it was like, this thing is just not. That's just not it, So they're working on it, but yeah, I think it is going to be a while. Maybe be in beta for a couple years. Who knows? Hopefully not, of course. But if that's what it takes, to be honest, I'm fine with that. PTCGO, like after playing PTCG Live and seeing as to that's what they wanted to give us as a client replacement for PTCGO. Take your time. At least we know something is coming. And with this recent letter to the community, we know they are at least s- they're at least making an effort. We have to see how much of an effort they're willing to make, though.
Definitely. Well, we'll move on to the next section of the podcast here. And we're going to be talking about an online tournament that took place a couple weeks ago now. Like I said earlier, we did want to talk about this last week, but last week's episode was just so full of a bunch of different topics, we couldn't quite fit it in. But there was a tournament that took place a couple of weeks ago, which was called the Tournament of Champions. It was put on by the Shuffle Squad, and the top 128 globally ranked Pokemon TCG Masters were invited to compete in this event, which had a $2,000 prize pool and free entries. So it was free entry for 128 players, a chance to win $1,000 for first place, and then the rest broke down through the top eight. Honestly, really cool. Love to see something like this going on. And the idea here, I think, was that it would build up hype and that people would be excited about it. And it gave the top players something to play for, put a little money on the line, and get yourself a chance to participate. But there was obviously a lot of people who would have loved to have played an event like this who were not in the top 128. So they held a last chance qualifier the night before this event, where I think it was over 100 players played, and then they took the top cut with an asymmetrical cut and gave them invites to the actual tournament. It ended up being 11 players, and then 10 of those 11 players ended up actually playing in the tournament. So 10 of the people who participated were from the last chance qualifier, and the total number of players whenever the event actually ended up happening was only 37, meaning that 27 of the top 128 ranked players in the globe chose to play in this event, which is really, I guess, a little surprising. Or is it surprising? Because with it being close to Worlds, maybe people are trying to keep their Worlds play close to the chest. Obviously, you could just show up and play like a cookie cutter Palkia or Arceus deck and, have a chance at some cash. But most players chose not to do that. One of those players being yourself, Azul. So maybe you personally, why don't you just give us your opinions on how, when you saw this tournament get announced, obviously you were one of these players who it was meant to be for. What were kind of your initial thoughts on it? Were you considering playing in it? And why did you end up choosing not to play in the tournament?
Yeah. So when I saw it and I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like people like obviously shout out to Shuffle Squad for hosting the tournament, right? $2,000 prize pool is huge for online tournaments. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Like when I initially saw it, I was just like, okay, it's kind of cool. But I guess I did kind of think, but why? Like I didn't get why. Like we have Worlds coming up, isn't that? We literally have Worlds. Was it 3 weeks after that now, or maybe four? It just
It
didn't
took place
feel
like
like.
about 4 weeks before Worlds.
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of felt. I mean, I guess there was a little bit of dead time between NAIC and Worlds, but I feel like it wasn't. We weren't starving for tournaments either. Right? No one was like. It wasn't like the COVID, times where like when the online scene initially kicked off, we were super hyped for it. The first limitless tournaments happened, and then the Players Cup happened. And we weren't like starving for tournaments, since Robin has put together like the online tournament site, and then the season started back up, and obviously we weren't starving for tournaments then. So it just kind of felt like why. And of course, like I was saying, shout out to Shuffle Squad. Them doing anything is better than nothing, of course. I think they could have done it a little bit differently. Oh, I guess I'll mention like so I didn't play and I was just up late Friday night and I was like I'm not gonna wake up at 9 a.m. Like this is just too early for me to wake up. I don't want to wake up at 9 a.m. Even though there's $1,000 online for first, I was like, there's going to be a lot more players putting a lot more time and trying that much harder than me going into this. And like Chip said, I'm not going to play any of the decks that I'm going to consider to play for Worlds at this tournament either. I could have showed up with a Palkia or just played Arceus B Barrel again, but just to wake up at, I guess I would have had to wake up at like 8 a.m. or 8:30, start up the stream and play in this tournament. I just wasn't feeling it, so I didn't play in it. I will say, like I said, I think there's different ways, and they can do whatever they want as far as tournaments go. But there's different ways. There's a couple of better ways. I think they could have done a tournament as far as like an invitational. I think would have been better, like a 16-person invitational. Maybe you invite 2 people through an LCQ. Find players who would want to participate, like high level players from around the globe. I'm sure time zone was a big reason we didn't see. Like time zone wasn't really an issue for me. I just didn't want to wake up at 9 a.m. But I'm sure that's a reason for like the Australians and stuff why they didn't show up, right?
Yeah.
Or just what, like a lot of the top players, they're not online tournament grinders. And that's something we talked about a little bit. Like throw together a 2K event. Maybe you do like a little bit of an invite, but then make it majority for the people who grind these online events. I think, you know, hold like a 2K event, an open 2K event. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, honestly, this tournament ends up. I mean, I think when you consider the scale of what they were hoping for and what ended up happening, I mean, I think you just have to consider it a failure. And it's by no means me saying that is not a slight at the Shuffle Squad. I'm also, just like Azul, very appreciative of the fact that anyone wanted to put this on. But the fact that so few of the invited players showed up to the event, it has to just be considered like, a failure. It did not go as good as it could have, or as good as it should have. I actually ended up putting out a tweet about this. I said it's wild that there was an online tournament today with 2K in prizing for the top 128 players in the world that had a free invite to, and only 37 people chose to play in it. Why did so many of the qualified players choose not to play in a free tournament where first place won $1,000? And I posted this just because I wanted to kind of spark a little bit of a discussion, wanted to hear what people's thoughts were on it, because I mean, if the money doesn't motivate people to play the game, um, you know, what like is it the fact that it wasn't enough, or what really at the core of it would have motivated more players to participate in this event? And there was a lot of great responses from some of the best players in the world, which is kind of what I was hoping to see. Like, we've got iCaterpie Alessandro here, won a regionals this season. He said, I had no idea there was a tournament, but I probably would not play anyway because of the reasons explained by Sander Wojcik, which I'll read next. Right now, Worlds is the most important thing we are all focused about. So that, I think, was a partial issue, is that some of the top 128 didn't even know that this was a thing. And I
Yeah.
think it's because the Shuffle Squad just kind of relied on their tweets, their posts in the Facebook groups being enough to get, like, word of mouth being enough to get to these players. And when you're dealing with a worldwide player base, word of mouth just isn't quite going to cut it, I don't think.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't seem like it. Like, I mean, it's different from me and you. We're on Twitter all the time, following people. We're very much about that kind of social media connection as far as we go. So we're gonna know about it, right? But yeah, like a lot of people, even in the top 128, their life's not that much about Pokemon. It looked like a couple people, like, Safan was on vacation.
Yeah.
Rahul was out. I don't know where. He sent a picture. He put a picture of one of the replies. He lived by some river or
He
something,
was
so
hiking,
touching
bro.
some. Yeah, I got tricked into touching grass. So yeah, like a lot of people I think didn't know about it. I think Henry's probably had the funniest response. Classic time zone scam to avoid stimulating the Australian economy.
Yeah, all
The
the
Australians were all
Australian
sleeping.
replies were funny. Maddie B replied, as well as Natalie Miller, all just being like, Maddie B said, I probably would have if it didn't start at 3 a.m. I can't find Natalie's tweet, but she just, oh yeah, here it is. She just sent a screenshot of the tournament start time being 2 a.m. Australian. So, I mean, that part of the world obviously I think makes sense, that the timing just didn't work out. But and then also Frank Persic replied and said, to be fair, I was very interested in playing, but forgot to check
Yeah.
in, which I think is the most Frank response. Uh,
Oh, dude,
but
Frank's
then,
been
like, there's
struggling
several
with.
other people here in the replies that are like, I had no idea this was even happening.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's probably the main one, to be honest. And then the other ones were just like the other people who knew about it just had a lot of them seemed to have other things uh going on. A lot of people just seem to have other things going on. Like I said, I just didn't want to wake up at 9 a.m. to play in the tournament. And yeah, like I said, I think they could have done it, but it was like it was kind of like it seemed like it was an invitational, but then they never actually invited the invitees,
And to
right?
their credit, it isn't like easy to just go to the global leaderboard. Like, you see the list of players, but some of the names on there are not
Of
people's
course,
names.
yeah.
It's like screen names, and it's like, who is this, like me myself, I'm not going to know a lot of the top 128 players that are not from North America. I know most of the North American players. I would say I probably know most of the names of the European players. Probably could know more of the Latin American players' names for sure. And it's like, how do I reach out to these people who I don't see their names on Twitter? I don't interact with them at all. How would you go about, even reaching out to some of these people to that
Yeah.
point, I guess?
No, and I agree too. And that's what I was saying. I think it would have been better if it was like a smaller invitational, like a
Yeah.
16-person invitational. maybe still do an LCQ for a couple spots. 32-man even invitational, right? And you invite some of the best players in the world, and you at least you confirm players you can bring. And even then, when it's a smaller tournament, you can make it a little bit more time zone friendly for maybe like some of the Australians or Europeans or whatever as well, right? So yeah, I don't think it like I said, like you said, it does kind of feel like it was a failure overall. I'm sure they wanted more out of it, and it would have been cool. Like if 100 of the top 128 showed up, you got some of the best names in the game, some of them streaming, but and then they had their own stream as well. But being able to showcase those players as well would have been cool. But yeah, not very many showed up. Over a third of the tournament was the LCQ players, and they wanted more out of it. I think it just could have been done. I think it just could have been done differently. Everything can always be done better. It's impossible for something to not be done better. So of course everything can be done better, but I think differently is probably the better way to look at it. Because like I said, when I looked at it, I was like, I see the tournament. Maybe I'll play in it, but I was really just like, why? I didn't understand the point of the tournament. I guess. Like I said, we're not trying to rag on them, but yeah, it just felt off a little bit. And like I said, I think there's a couple different ways so they could have done differently. And I do hope that if they have the resources and the time and whatever, they do kind of do another tournament and hopefully learn from this one, and hopefully it ends up bigger and better for them and for the Pokemon community in general, and hopefully they do run some more tournaments in the future.
And the last reply I want to read from my tweet here is from Sander Wojcik, who said, revealing you and your group's prep for a shot at 1K isn't worth. The stakes at Worlds are simply way, way higher. In fact, exactly these top 128 have the best shot at the successful Worlds, and thus the biggest incentive to not play in a public event with lots of eyes on it. And he also replied here and said, sure, you could play a cookie cutter list and try to win some money. Nothing wrong with that. Then again, you could also allocate those 6 hours to IRL/in-group testing with the decks. You are actually preparing for the most prestigious tournament of the season that is in a couple of weeks. And I definitely agree with those points. And I think that is certainly a factor for some players. And Benji Fam also replied to this tweet and said, replied to Sanders' initial tweet and said, I told some Europeans about it. Most common reasons not to play were 1, they didn't know about it or thought it was later. 2, they do not want to show their Worlds deck in this event. And 3, they did not want to use their free time for this event / they had other things to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that sums it up pretty well for sure.
Definitely. Well, and we'll move on from there to everyone's favorite segment. It is time, as always, for Guess That Flavor Text, the section of the podcast where one of us picks a card from the history of the Pokemon TCG, reads the little bit of text in the bottom right corner, that flavor text, and the other host has to guess what card the other person is reading. You get 3 lifelines. If you guess the card correctly without any lifelines, you get 4 points. And for each lifeline you use, you lose a point. And the lifelines this week, as always, are 1, what set the card is from, 2, what stage the card is, and then 3, read an attack name. This week it is Azul's turn to pick a card, read the flavor text for me to guess, and of course for you to play along at home. Azul, yeah, I thought I gave you one you would be able to get last week. It didn't quite work out for you, but what have you got for me this week, bud?
Yeah, I got one. I think there's a shot you could get this one for sure, but we'll see. Are you ready?
I am ready.
A constant collector of information. This Pokemon is very smart. Very strong is what it isn't.
Azul Gigi. No. Weakling. No. I mean, I think that my first thoughts are definitely going to psychic type Pokemon. So my first thought would be like the Reuniclus line, Solosis or Duosion, very, psychic smart Pokemon, but I mean, it's just a floating blob of cells. Definitely can't be very strong. Will you read the flavor text for me one more time?
A constant collector of information. This Pokemon is very smart. Very strong is what it isn't.
Okay, I'll ask what set the card is from.
Sword and Shield.
All right, there is no Reuniclus in Sword and Shield. Another Pokemon I was thinking of was Behem. And it is not Behia because there's also not a Beheam in Sword and Shield. But there is in Sword and Shield an Orbeetle. And Orbeetle is a Pokemon that I've read some of its flavor texts before, actually. And or like its Pokedex entries, maybe, which usually flavor texts are. And it definitely talks about how it's insanely smart, especially the Gigantamax one. I think is like the smartest Pokemon, or like has the biggest brain. And it definitely has a tiny little body. So I could just snag 3 points here if I guessed that and it was correct. And I honestly don't know if guessing, I guess I don't know what else I would guess, even if I whittled down the stage. It's a chance to get 3 points. I'll ask what stage the card is. I'll use one more lifeline. What stage is the card?
It is a basic.
Okay, it's not Orbeetle. All right. Well, I'm glad I asked that. Um. Okay. Well, now I am definitely clueless, so I'm gonna need that last lifeline. I think I'm gonna have you read an attack name.
It has Call for Family.
Oh man. Not very helpful. Could be so many Pokemon. Basic Pokemon, smart. What is the basic of Orbeetle? It's not Dottler. Is it Dottler? Oh my gosh. I think Dottler's the stage 1. No, Dottler's like Vivillon's stage 1. Dude, I'm getting my generations bugs confused here. Oh no. It's not Blipbug. That's Is it Blipbug? I'm gonna go with Blipbug. I think Blipbug is Vivillon's basic though. I think I'm getting them confused. Is it Blipbug?
You locking it in?
I'm locking it in.
It is
Let's
Blipbug.
go! I couldn't remember what is. All right, so that is Orbeetle's basic, right?
Yep, Blipbug, Dottler, Orbeetle. Who reads Orbeetle's flavor text? I thought you had me when you said I was just hoping you'd guess Orbeetle, and then you asked for the stage. I was like, oh no, and now I'm done. He gets 2 points. Who just reads Orbeetle flavor text? That's such a weird thing to do.
Listen,
Let him
man.
all the way from Orbeetle. Let him all the way to the Blipbug.
It got me there eventually. Is Dottler the stage? It
Stage 1,
is
yeah.
Dottler. Blipbug to Dottler to Orbeetle. Dang it. Now I'm.
Yeah.
What is Vivillon's basic? Spoopa. I was getting that whole line confused. And then Scatterbug is the basic. I was getting them all confused. But thankfully, I got the one correct that needed. Let us know in the comments of the YouTube video, did you get Blipbug as well? Were you able to get on the board here? I do get on the board, and I think I actually now am leading maybe for the first time, I think.
Is this it?
It
Was
might
I the
be.
first one to get the
I should
point?
be up 3-2 here, so let's go Team Chip.
I thought we both had. Yeah, we both have 2. That's true.
We both have 2. Not anymore, though. Okay, and we'll move on to the final segment of the cast this week, where we are going to be talking about worlds. We did tweet out over on the Uncommon Energy podcast Twitter asking for some questions. We're going to be talking about worlds this week. We just tweeted out and asked what questions were people had. What are the things you want to hear, whether it's about the meta, the format, or just worlds in general. So this week, what we're going to do is we'll talk about some of these questions and also talk about our world's meta thoughts, the top decks, what we think each of them could do at the event, or if there's any sleepers that we think could maybe show up and make a deep run of like tier 2, tier 3 decks, and then weave the questions into those as well. And then next week we'll be kind of giving our last second meta thoughts, since it'll be just a few days before Worlds, and we'll also answer some more of these questions. So if you asked a question and it didn't get answered this week, don't worry, it may get answered in next week's episode. And also, if you are listening along at home and you hear us talk about something and you want to know our thoughts a little bit more in depth, or if you come up with a question you'd like to ask, feel free to do it over there on the Twitter. The podcast Twitter is at uncommon_energy, or you can leave it in the YouTube comments as well, and we'll try to pull some more questions from YouTube next week.
Yep, sounds good. So let's get right into it. I guess with the first question that is probably going to be most relevant before the tournament even starts. I guess we'll just both give like kind of our experiences. It comes from at Matty Ice Bucket. Is travel lag a thing? How early should you arrive days before an event that is drastically different than your own time zone? So most people probably have their flights booked, so they won't be able to adjust their flights based on our, experiences. But Chip, uh, does is travel lag a thing for you?
It has been. So I've only traveled um super far for a tournament 2 times, like, outside of my own time zone. I think I've always played in either East Coast or Central Time Zone for tournaments, outside of when I went to Worlds in 2017 for Anaheim, which that was going backwards, and that wasn't too bad going backwards, because, I usually kinda just stay up late anyway, and so it kind of worked out to where, like, I was getting tired. Normally, I like if I go to bed normally at like 1 or 2 a.m. Now I'm getting tired around 10, 11, which is like a much more normal time. Um, so that wasn't really too bad for me. But this year when I went to EUIC for casting, it was, I believe, 5 hours ahead, maybe 6 hours ahead,
Yeah.
and that was actually pretty tough. And I really wished I had gotten there a day earlier to just give myself another chance to get caught up. I think another issue was that just the regionals, or sorry, the internationals streams are much more work than the regional streams. It feels like the events, like we stream much more rounds. There's so much more going on. We have the hosting stuff going on as well that we're doing. So there's just more aspects to it. It's a much more tiring, and we have more rehearsals and stuff like that. So um, pretty much, I mean, it was like an overnight flight. I landed at 8 a.m. and then that afternoon had rehearsal. So that was kind of tough. So I think like the for especially a tournament like this, if you're traveling more than a few hours outside of your usual time zone, I think getting in at least one full day before the tournament so that you have like a day to sleep, or like a night to sleep, and then a day to not worry about the tournament before the tournament would be ideal. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, I would generally say sometimes it affects me and sometimes it doesn't. And it's one of those things where it's like not everyone's gonna have that much time to take off, right? But if, like a lot of people time up their IC travels and their world trips with vacations, right? Because it kind of is a vacation in itself. So you kind of a lot of people take those extra extra week or extra couple days before the tournament to, just get there early, get to do some other stuff in somewhere you've never been
Sightseeing.
before. Yeah, some sightseeing, and then also it'll help with the jet lag thing. So I would like to get. I would recommend trying to get as early as you can, but of course the limit it depends on your limitations, right? Like if you could just like you know get there a week ahead of time and work remotely that week. I mean, that sounds like the move to me. So if that's like an available option for you, then I would definitely recommend trying to get there, reasonably early, get those extra days in. I always feel like I wish I had been like there, like you said, like a day earlier would have been nice, for jet lag reasons. So I'm getting in Tuesday for Worlds, and then I don't play till Friday, so I'll have I get in Tuesday morning, so I'll have Wednesday, Thursday. Would have liked to have maybe gotten in, Saturday or Sunday. I think like next time, especially for like Worlds, maybe some of the ICs, I'll try and get there a little bit earlier next season. Um, do a little bit more of like a vacation slash, get ahead on the because it's definitely hit me a couple ICs. It's hit me pretty hard to be honest, and I've been like kind of miserable during like the 2 days of tournament play. It's just been rough. So it definitely is a thing. Some people it doesn't affect at all though. So it definitely is a person thing, person to person thing. But I think it for the most people it does seem to be a thing. So I would say if you have the flexibility to get there early, you should always try and get there early for sure.
Yeah, and you can also try to like adjust your schedule at home by a few hours to try to ease yourself into it if you know you're going to be traveling. So that's something else you could probably try to do if you're trying to fight jet lag specifically. All right, next question comes up from Den of Thieves. When attempting to make meta driven predictions about the meta for Worlds this year, what sources of information take priority over others? And I think the big thing here is kind of just how much do the results of online tournaments, because on Limitless you can literally pull up the decks and see the matchups for each of the decks played on the website through the Play Limitless platform, you can see those win percentages and see matchup spreads, which is a pretty useful tool. But you also have to consider that, like we talked about earlier with the Shuffle Squad tournament, many of the top players who are going to be the majority of players playing in day two of Worlds don't play in these online events. So how much does that really affect the skew is, or how much does it actually skew the results, I guess would be the question.
I mean, I definitely think like that's kind of general. I feel like general meta at World is less relevant. And especially when you don't have like tournaments back, when you have like tournaments back to back happening really fast, there's less time for the meta to evolve or for someone to come up with something new or broken. So generally, it's an adjustment of, pick a different top deck or adjust your top deck to, be teched out for the now expected meta. But at Worlds, there's so many people and there's such a big break between like the last tournament and we got a new set to work with Pokemon, the Pokemon Go set. Not as big as a full set release like we've had in the past, but it's big enough to have a big enough impact where there's just going to be so much to not have any idea of what's going on that I wouldn't read too much into it being like you're just not going to probably play against. Maybe in day one you will, but you're not going to play like at NAIC. I think I played against like day one, I played against like 3 Mews and 4 Palkias or something. Like I don't think that's gonna happen. That's not gonna happen at Worlds though. Day one or day
A
two,
much
you're
more
gonna be hitting
diverse meta, you would expect.
much more diverse, and I think you'll see higher counts of decks that people think are good, but just have never been really popular. Stuff like Dialga. Like Dialga is a deck that I think is really really good, and I could definitely see that being just fairly popular overall. Ice Rider, I could see that as well, although I don't think Ice Rider is very good. It's had some hype recently, but like that's a deck that I could also see just being that one less reasonably popular. I don't know why it shouldn't be popular, but like I could see that being more popular for like the same reason, right? Let's just like these decks are more people are going out of their way to try and play something different and unique because just playing a Palkia Inteleon, playing an Arc Inteleon, I just don't think is going to give you as good of a shot to win the World Championships. Now to make it from day one to day two, to maybe get to top 32, they're a little bit more reasonable choices. But if your goal is to top 8, potentially win the whole thing, you're trying to, bring something different and new and give yourself that extra edge overall. So I would definitely say expect something more diverse. It's definitely a lot harder to read the meta for sure.
So I think a reason that if we look at NAIC that the meta was so small, like the variety of decks played was so minimal, right? Pretty much, I think if you look at the top 100 ranked players in the world or something like that, a super high percentage, maybe like I would have to do the numbers, but I would imagine like 70+% of those players played either Palkia or Arceus Inteleon. And then even like some of the other really great players who would rank outside of the top 100 who are still like, top level players played one of those two decks. And I think the reason for that is because the meta was still pretty young at that point with Astral Radiance. We had the Melbourne Regionals, which Palkia obviously dominated, took 8 out of the 8 spots. The Milwaukee Regional Championships was kind of a mess where we saw Arceus, Duraludon, and Blissey show up and do really well. And I think the fact that those kind of like random rogue decks showed up and did really well led many of the top players to just pick a really consistent list of one of the best decks, and that's
Yeah.
what ended up happening. Was it became evident after the event, you won the tournament with Arceus Flying Pikachu, but very few people are talking about Arceus Flying Pikachu as the best deck in the format. The best deck in the
Yeah.
format is without a doubt Palkia Inteleon, and right behind it Arceus Inteleon. So we have a very much more formed meta. People are much more sure about, given the card pool, what the top decks are, and I think now moving into Worlds with that information, you'll see the majority of the top players. Sure, some of them will still choose to play Palkia, some of them will still choose to play Arceus Inteleon, but you'll see many more players branch out and find things that are really solid against those decks, at least having 50-50s in those matchups, and choose to bring those because they're a little bit more unexpected. And that is a huge factor at these tournaments, is having something like being able to play cards out and your opponent does not know what is coming. List knowledge
Yeah.
is such a big deal. We've seen that over the past couple of years through online events. And when you're like, I played this past weekend or 2 weekends ago now in the Carolina State Championships. I talked about that, which is obviously just like a small local tournament, not really relevant to Worlds at all. But I was playing an off meta deck, my like Arceus Fire deck, and I got to surprise people a bunch with the different things that I was playing because nobody's like they don't know what's coming. And that is if you can find something that is going to leave people guessing what you have in your deck. I think like Frank Persick at EUIC with the Whimsicott, or even the Urshifu players with Urshifu, because that was kind of the first tournament that it had popped up really big. People didn't know what everyone had in their decks, and when you're leaving people guessing, that's when you get to shine as a player. So I think we'll see the majority of the top players not play those two decks.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and then that's what I think it's going to be hard to not just win the tournament if you just choose to play one of those two decks. I think it'll be even hard to get like push for even like top 32 if you're not trying to bring something different. You're just going to be like another Palkia player who decided to play Palkia, and then it's basically going to be the RNG of the event will be okay, you made top 32 or not. But if you go out of your way to test and come up with something different and unique, you have such a higher chance of making top 8, of winning the tournament, of making even just like a top 32 at Worlds. Otherwise, you're just like another of the 20 Palkia players in day 2, and then depending on how the RNG of the rounds go, you might be the Palkia player to get up to the top. But like, there's so much more than just playing well to be consistently at the top in the game. There's more than just playing well. You have to try and get all those little advantages where you can, and one of them is bringing maybe not always the next best deck, but something just as good as everything else that's just different is good enough to give yourself a
Yes.
huge edge. And if you want to be able to consistently take advantage of that, you can't just settle for playing Palkia and Inteleon, Arceus and Inteleon all the time if you want to be a consistently great player.
Absolutely. So it went a little bit beyond, I think, what the question was asking, but it all kind of stems together.
Yeah.
So now those are just kind of like the intro questions here. Let's now talk about each of the top archetypes. We'll give our opinions on them, and then we have a few questions weaved in here from Twitter as well that as they are relevant to the specific decks that we're going to be talking about. So we'll start it off with Palkia. Of course, the best deck in the format. Had a bunch of top 8 spots at NAIC. Isaiah Bradner ended up getting second place with it, and I would say that is the list that most people have been focusing on and copying as far as testing goes.
I think it's pretty 50-50. I feel like recently I've been seeing more Battle VIP Pass lists, but I do think actually that, especially like after NAIC, there was a lot of people playing close to what Yoshi was playing with the rare candies. Or the rare candy, I should say, and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty close. I think it's pretty close between the quad battle. I guess like the two things that I feel like I separate the list for me is rare candy and quad battle VIP pass.
Okay.
So, but I did just look at like a results from a tournament, and one of the lists does have rare candy with quad battle VIP pass. So, but yeah, like the more teched out build with one battle VIP pass, still playing Fort Irida. They all play Fort Irida.
Yeah.
Versus the 4 battle VIP pass.
Sure.
I feel like it's pretty close to 50-50 in the two camps of Palkia.
So we kind of already gave our thoughts a little bit. Like, it feels like if you're choosing to play Palkia for Worlds, I think you have to either be one of the best players or just kind of like be okay rolling the dice to try to get top 32. I don't know that like you have to be insanely confident in your play, because everyone, like, this is the deck everyone is going to know what they're going to do against. They are going to have a game plan. You either have to play out of your mind, which plenty of players can do, or you have to have a few tricks and different techs and things like that, ways to spice up matchups and surprise your opponent.
Yeah, I definitely need a little bit, I think. I mean, you could just like take Bradner's list, maybe change 1 or 2 cards and then like rock that. And you could it's hard for me to say that I don't think that kind of deck will win the tournament. I think Palkia is very good. It's the best deck for a reason, and it doesn't have that big of a target on its back because the deck is like not that overwhelmingly powerful. I think everyone respects it as probably being the best deck in the format, but it's not overly whelmingly powerful to the point where it's like it doesn't feel like Mew VMAX when Mew VMAX was considered the BDIF, right? Like it doesn't feel like overwhelmingly powerful. It's impossible to beat with like so many decks. Like it's very beatable for a lot of decks, and you have to realize everyone is going to have a plan. Like no one's going into the tournament not being able to beat Palkia. It doesn't mean they're going to be extremely favored, but everyone's at least trying to be 50-50 to maybe only slightly unfavored. But if their deck is, sneaky enough or has enough, weird stuff in it, in a best 2 out of 3, you're not going to be able to play optimally on the Palkia side of things your first best 2 out of 3 against someone who's playing something cheesy, right? So I definitely think it's still a solid play, and I do think it is the best deck overall. But going into as unknown of a meta as this is, I definitely don't favor it to be a tournament winner.
And we do have a question regarding Palkia from Lighter Iverson, who asks, "What is the key slash swing points in the Palkia mirror, primarily in play, but also in lists?" And for me, one of the biggest uh, swings that you can potentially take is definitely in the list building, and something I think we've seen very little looked at in discussion on is the list that Gustavo Wada used to get top 8. Gustavo lost to Bradner in top 8 of NAIC. Now, if the things go the other way, potentially, maybe it's Gustavo who you're playing in the finals as opposed to Isaiah. Both of them are incredibly competent players, so I don't think it would have been a surprise to see either of them. Whoever wins that match could easily have been in the finals, and it's like they're playing a mirror match, so it can definitely go either way when you're talking about two players at the top of their game. Obviously, Isaiah did end up coming out on top, but Gustavo had some super interesting techs. The main ones being the quick shooting Intellion, which is something Isaiah did not play, and then also Leon in his deck. And we saw him make crazy plays with it in the stream. I remember at one point watching him leave himself with just like 2 or 3 Pokemon in play, so his opponent's not going to be able to respond with a one-hit KO. And in one turn, he goes quick shooting, scoop up net, quick shooting, choice belt, Leon, adds 100 damage to his attack out of nowhere. Like how, like that is just I think creating situations like that where you can just take a big swing and leave your opponent scrambling is what's going to set you apart in those type of matchups.
Yeah, no, I think like one of those, at least one of those kind of cards, you'll definitely want to play. But we did see when you match up the tech versus the consistency.
Oh, sorry. I
Um,
just remembered it was not double quick shooting. What he did was he went. His opponent had left 4 Pokemon in play, so he went Echoing Horn plus Choice Belt plus quick shooting plus Leon. So it's still like a crazy, plus 100 damage turn, but it was pretty wild.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what we do see is like when you see tech go up against consistency of Gustavo versus Bradner, it's not tech that just always comes out on top, right? So there's a fine line between over teching and under teching. And the goal at the end of the day is to make the most powerful, make the archetype you're choosing to bring to the tournament as powerful as possible, which just means you're just trying to get the highest win percentage possible. So if you can do these cute Leon plays in the mirror match, that's great. But how much are you using Leon against everything else, right? That's like going to be the question. So
Yeah, one
um,
shot's flying P.
it does. So those kind of tech cards are like good. And like yeah, I think for as far as swing cards in the mirror match go, Leon's pretty good, Cheryl's pretty good. I think as far as in-game plays that happen, the one that I feel like not that many people know about as far as the Palkia mirror goes is just not when you've drawn your first 2 prize cards as Palkia, do not draw your next 2 prize cards until you draw 4 prize cards in a turn to play around Roxanne. Because if you let them Roxanne, is really if they have Roxanne plus any reasonable control over their board, they're gonna be able to make it very easy for them to limit your ability to get a one-hit KO. So the play you look for is you just hit a Palkia. Like if you KO the first Palkia V to like stay ahead and maintain your lead and not give your opponent a chance to come back with Roxanne, you just hit the next Palkia for 260, 270, and the next turn you go Goon Ping, Echoing Horn, Boss, KO the Palkia V again, and then you drew 4 prize cards in a turn, and they never had a chance to Roxanne. So if that's definitely if you're not doing that in the mirror match when you're ahead and you definitely need to add that to your arsenal of plays because otherwise you can just get Roxanne on and then lose from there. And they can kind of set up the exact same board state back at you. They can go like Roxanne and then not KO that Palkia fully and then draw 4 prize cards in their own turn. So definitely need to be trying to take advantage of that when you have the ability to. And that's why Cheryl is a counter card in the mirror. And if they don't know you play that and they're ahead and they go for that and then you drop the Cheryl on them, they're in trouble. So I mean, I think
that's
maybe
like almost like a meta within the meta as well. Of like,
I mean, yeah. So
as to choosing Cheryl in your deck, like it's like, do you choose to play Cheryl, respecting your opponents enough that they are going to make this play in the mirror match? Because I mean, it's kind of a sneaky play, right? Not something
yeah.
most people would recognize and go for.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier with Zigzagoon. The quick shoot,
Sure.
playing quick shooting. I will say, I do think Zigzagoon is just better than quick
I think
shooting. I
so.
think
Yeah.
Zigzagoon should come first. If you're not playing Goon, if you're playing quick shooting, you should either cut it for Zigzagoon or include Zigzagoon alongside it. I don't think quick shooting is bad, but I think Goon should come first, and it makes that play a lot easier to pull off. But yeah, if everyone knows about the play, then Cheryl pretty good. And we did see Tord played Cheryl. I wonder if that was what Tord specifically played the Cheryl for at Milwaukee Regionals. Tord had the Cheryl in there, so Tord was rocking the Cheryl
I think he did still play it at
back then.
NAIC, but he didn't make day two, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not sure about NAC, yeah, but so that's like a card to consider for a mirror match. And it's good again. I mean, Cheryl's good. Healing your Pokemon's is kind of good, right? As long as you're not getting one hit KO'd, um, pretty good to just heal that much damage, right? You probably don't want to do that up against an Arc Intel though, because they'll be happy to match you heal for heal. They have more, so if you're gonna Cheryl, they'll Cheryl care, but they'll take that trade off for sure. But it's definitely a cool card for the mirror for sure.
And speaking of Arc Intel, definitely the second most talked about deck, the second most played deck on the Play Limitless platform as well. Kind of, I would say, sitting right up there with Palkia as BDIF contender. Was really popular at NAIC. There's just so many ways to play Arceus and so many ways to play Arceus Inteleon as well, that it kind of all gets lumped together almost. I feel like, like people have been playing Charizard or not playing Charizard. Starmie's really not something we've seen much of since NAIC, but it was in most of those NAIC lists, it feels like. But yeah, Arceus Inteleon. I get something that's been a huge discussion this past week online in the community is the Arceus Inteleon versus Palkia matchup, where it feels like most of the Arceus Inteleon players are like, yeah, it's 50-50, or it's like close. And then all the Palkia players are like, it's 85-15, or like 65-35, something like that. Like everyone, the Palkia players all think it's incredibly favored for them. And from my experience playing it out as well, I would honestly tend to lean Palkia's direction. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't play either of the decks enough to care too much about it, but I do think it's Palkia favored when it does come up, and I put in the time in the matchup. It definitely feels Palkia favored overall. A lot of little plays you can do there around your Greninja. Keeping your Greninja around as an option is huge. They really can't bench Manaphy, so your Greninja is always a play, and they don't
A
really
lot of
want to
people aren't
boss
even
KO
playing
your.
Manaphy.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't even playing Mana because it's not good in the matchup, right? Benching the
Yeah.
extra, if you bench the extra Pokemon, that means your Arceus V on the bench that you just Charon's cared picked up and put back down, so you can Charon's care again next turn with the big charm is at risk of just getting KO'd. So you can't really bench the Manaphy to begin with. There is like a moment in the game where you're far enough ahead where you can kind of like drop multiple Sobbles and the Manaphy in the same turn, but you have to be ahead at that point, and to get there, it definitely feels like you don't get there very often, so the Manaphy just doesn't feel very good. But if there's other decks sniping in the format, then it makes Manaphy worth. But I can't think of I guess if you're afraid of like Urshifu, but then you have to play the Dunsparce as well, so you have to play both of them. So you do have to kind of commit to the double package. But I think Arceus Intelligence is okay. I'm not a huge fan of it just because it's like if you're gonna I just don't want to play a deck that's like even I just don't want to play a deck that's unfavored against Palkia. I don't know, like it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree. And a question relating to something you were just talking about from OptiLulz over on Twitter asks, what is the best Arceus package for Worlds now that folks seem in agreement that pure Arc Intel isn't good enough? And then are lists without Dunsparce/Manaphy just Urshifu propaganda for Worlds? So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if Urshifu showed up and did pretty well. I do think Urshifu does not do great against Palkia. I think you could maybe build it to do okay against it. I think Cheryl really strong against Palkia with Urshifu. You have to like limit your bench, but like I don't know, it becomes kind of a weird one. I mean, Urshifu has 330 HP. Like Palkia is not one hit KOing it. So you got to make sure it sticks around. All of the Palkias playing Manaphy is pretty annoying for Urshifu. I don't know. I think I don't know how much I would be worried about playing Dunsparce in Arceus. I would maybe I would lean towards Dunsparce before Manaphy, I think, personally. Just because Manaphy, like you mentioned, not great in the Palkia matchup, which is kind of annoying because that's like
Yeah.
where it would be the best against Radiant Greninja. And then as far as what best package that since pure Arc Intel isn't good enough, quote unquote, I think I would definitely be trying to play Radiant Charizard because that card just helps Arceus out so much where it has struggled before, where, it plays this really good early game. It can be aggressive in the early game. You can do cute little like boss Zigzagoon choice belt plays if you're playing that build, or you can just be really tanky and healy in the early game with Sharon's Care and big charms. And then in the late game, having a one-hit KO option in the Charizard is super strong.
Yeah, no, when I'm talking about like Arc Intel in general, I'm definitely talking about the more staple build that was played at NAIC. Two Charon's Cares, 1 to
Right.
2 Palpad. Not a huge fan of that. I do think the Charizard, although I think people are doing the Charizard thing a little bit weird, where they're like, there's like they're just putting the Charizard in, but then still keeping like two Charon's care. Like I feel like you just want to commit. And I tried out like a Arceus box list the other day, and I kind of liked it. It was just it was kind of the idea kind of came from Ian Robb's list at One Indiana. I cut all the dark stuff, but like I had Charizard in there, I had Zapdos, I had Raikou, and it was basically just like be aggressive with Arceus early, and then depending on the matchup, you have some tech attackers, and then in the late game, Charizard's always just good against anything. So it was just kind of like an aggressive Arceus like prize race list. That was pretty cool. So something like that, like I like a little bit more the idea of. But if like I don't know, once you start like adding Charizard and stuff, like still playing two Charon's Cares just feels just be more aggressive, do the goon choice belt plays and stuff like that. So those kind of lists I definitely like a little bit more. The Palkia matchup still feels pretty awkward at times, but if you got like the Raikou in there and stuff, or even like a Zero or some other kind of tech attacker to help you out, it doesn't feel too bad.
Yeah, playing the Goon Choice Belt combo in Arceus just feels so strong. Like, if you ever go first and just attach an energy, it's like not super. And if you're,
Not
especially
that
if you're
hard.
playing a list that has like Crobat in it, it's really not hard to dig for the boss KO a Pokemon V on turn two. And that just puts you so far ahead in almost every single matchup. Now, granted, it's a lot weaker whenever you're not going first because you're kind of like playing from behind just right off the bat, looking for that turn one Trinity Charge if you can get it, I guess. But yeah, I think like Zigzagoon, I think for most Arceus variants, with the exception of like Arceus Duraludon, I'm probably going to try to fit that combo in there personally, just because I think it's so good. But we got a couple other Arceus variants we want to talk about. One of them being Arceus Flying P, which of course you won the North American Internationals with. And it's kind of been surprising to me that it's really not been that talked about ever since it won NAIC. Obviously, I think it makes sense that Palkia is still considered BDIF, but even if we look over at Play Limitless, Arceus Flying Pikachu is the 7th most played deck in the Astro Radiance format, which is kind of surprising for a deck that just won the biggest tournament of the year. I don't know, as the person who won it, what are your kind of thoughts on its position right now in the meta, or maybe why it isn't, in the top 3 decks?
I mean, I think it was good for NAIC because it was a lot more narrow of a meta. Like I think I only played against, like trying to think back on it, I think I only played against Arcanteleon, Mew, and Palkia. Like I only played against and Sander, of course. But those are the only decks that I can remember playing against. I don't think I played against anything else. The meta felt like a lot more narrow and predictable. But it's not good against a lot of like other decks out there, like Dialga. Stuff like that is kind of rough. You can always Path Marnium, but you're like 100% all in on Path Marnie. Um, and then stuff like Ice Rider can be pretty tough as well, which has recently made like a resurgence. So like yeah, the off meta decks are just tough for the deck to deal with. Arcantel, of course, is an unfavorable matchup, and that got more popular as well after NAIC. So yeah, it's just I mean it was good for NAIC, but I don't think the deck, like I wouldn't play it at Worlds. Some people have asked me that, and I was like, no, I wouldn't play Arc Flying P at Worlds. I don't think the deck's terrible, but I think there's maybe a better Marnie Path deck out there. Maybe there's a better way to play Arc B Barrel right now. So that would maybe be the way to play. And I don't think about really it as Arc Flying P. It's just the best way to play Arceus B Barrel is the way I think about it. It's just like Arceus B Barrel is the deck, and the best partner for it at NAIC was just Flying Pikachu. It's not really an Arceus Flying Pikachu deck.
Sure. And a couple more Arceus decks here. We've got Arceus Mewtwo V Union, which has popped up and been a lot more played. It's not in the most played decks. It's pretty far down, actually, I think, because it is like a little bit newer, but it's done pretty decently. Kind of just a different way to play the Mewtwo V Union. It does seem like it has a pretty solid Palkia matchup, which is a big selling point for it. I know you played in a tournament with this deck. What are your kind of thoughts on it?
It's better than I thought I would, but I think there's a lot of and the amount I played it, like the from what I played of it, it just there's so many games I should have just lost if my opponent like knew what I could do. The deck's kind of out there a little bit more, but yeah, the deck just doesn't feel that powerful. Mewtwo Union very powerful, but what you have to do to kind of get it in play and get it going, the situation you kind of put it in when you put it into play, it doesn't feel like it actually does enough to make it better than just playing like a Palkia and Teleon deck. To be honest, like it doesn't feel as good as the top decks in the format overall. It's good. And it's been consistently more successful in like online tournaments than I thought it would be. I thought it'd fall off really hard and have its like moment for a little bit, but it's not quite there. It's like too clunky. It's like too, you can't really pick what you're doing pretty much ever. you're pretty much locked in on trying to rush out the Mewtwo, and if you whiff that, you sometimes just lose. So it's all right. It's a cool deck, but I don't think it's quite good enough.
And then the last Arceus variant. I mean, there's obviously plenty of other ways to play Arceus, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone came up with some unique way to add Arceus in for the World Championships. But Arceus Duraludon, I think I've just never been that big of a fan of this deck. Like, I understand that it's pretty strong, but it's so basic in its game plan. Like, you're doing the same thing every game, regardless of what you're playing against. And you're just pretty much accepting, like, if you're gonna play this deck, like, you're just hoping that your matchups are gonna be good enough to carry you through to top 8.
Yeah, not a big fan of Arceus Duraludon. I've actually even said, like, if you ran Milwaukee back and just the tournament replayed, I'd be surprised if a Duraludon made top 8. Like, that's how, like, unconfident I am in the deck. Like, I just don't think the deck's very good overall. I think it's like an okay way to play Arceus. And every time I go back to it, it has the same issues and same problems, and nothing's really evolved as far as it being that much better in the meta or as a deck. So yeah, not quite there.
Nobody's on the secret tech though for the deck. Is
What's the secret tech?
the scroll, the
Oh, the
single
300
strike
damage.
scroll of the fanged dragon, bro. Super strong slash 300 damage. All you got to do is slap a DTE on your Duraludon. All of a sudden, you're doing 280. KO and a Palkia out of nowhere. An
Don't
Arceus
you
that
like
didn't have a
you
big charm on it.
have to discard all your energy though, right?
Yeah, but it's like your last KO, so it's like fine.
Okay. Well, no, actually, it could be okay. It could be okay. I could see it, maybe. I mean, so the next deck we should talk about is when we talked about what we think are like the top 2 decks. The used to be top deck, Mew VMAX. It's been getting more popular recently in online tournaments.
How
It kind
the
of fell off
mighty have
really.
fallen, though.
Yeah, it fell off really hard after NAIC. It's been making a kind of a little bit of a resurgence, and I mean, like it. With people talking about bringing like Urshifu decks, like not Urshifu decks with like no dark stuff in it and like stuff like that. Maybe this is Mew's time. Maybe Mew's time is the world
No, Azul, stop!
championship.
You're supposed to
pro-
be done.
I won't be playing Mew,
Okay.
but if someone came through and just like took down the whole thing, it'd be kind of poetic, I guess.
All right. Thoughts on which would you be more surprised to see win Worlds? Mew Genesect or Palkia Inteleon? Which would be more surprising to see? Like, which one of those 2 decks do you think has a better chance to win?
What was that? Which one?
Do you think Palkia has a better chance to win, or Mew Genesect has a better chance to win?
Palkia for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if I had to pick between one of the 2 to win, I would rather
that
have.
That is the question I was asking. Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. I think it's more likely Palkia wins.
Okay.
But if I had to pick one to win, I would want Mew to win.
Oh, okay.
Like if I had to I think it's way more likely Palkia wins. But if I had to pick one to win, then yeah.
Like you would rather Mew win than Palkia win, is what you're saying?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I think it's more likely Palkia win. If I was betting, I'd bet on Palkia. But if I had to pick one to be like, I want this to win, then I'd pick Mew.
I feel like that little 60-second segment was way more complicated than it needed to be. I think we were both confused. Okay, moving on. Mew Genesect. I also would not be surprised to see Mew do pretty decently. I don't think that the top players, like the top 1% of the room, like I don't expect Tord to play it. I wouldn't expect Robin or Stefan or any of the top European players. I wouldn't expect Isaiah and that crew to play it. I wouldn't expect you to play it. I wouldn't be surprised if you rolled up with it. I hope you don't, Azul.
No, I won't play Mew. I'm not going to be playing Mew.
So I don't expect like the top tier. Like I also wouldn't expect like Gustavo or even I could maybe see the Australians rolling up with it, honestly, because they played it to that first regionals and like, obviously were pretty dedicated. And Kaiwin played it as well at EUIC and did pretty well with it. So that's probably of the top tier groups. I think the Australian group is the one I would most reasonably see bringing Mew Genesect. But I think that I also don't think most of those groups will choose to bring Palkia. I think maybe the top American group will play Palkia. I don't think the Euros will play Palkia personally, but we'll see. Okay, moving
Yeah, I
on.
wouldn't expect it.
Next one, a little bit more of a sleeper deck, being the Dialga V Star. So kind of the antithesis to Origin Form Palkia. The other side, the other booster pack art, the Origin Form Dialga V Star. Um, Dialga is a really cool deck, and it cannot be overstated how strong of an effect it is to take an additional turn from your opponent.
Yeah, no, Dialga. I've been playing quite a bit of it. Played in a tournament the other day. My only losses were because I misplayed. It's fairly difficult deck to play. The sequencing, it is definitely more of a solitary type deck. You don't have a ton of options every turn, but the deck is very strong. I think it's super good, and we haven't seen it have a ton of success in general that I can think of. So I could definitely see quite a few players rolling up with the Dialga and doing well with it. Like I don't know, the deck just seems really, really good. It's definitely a deck that people will be underprepared against, and there's not a whole ton of room to kind of check it out and stuff. There's some things like some people play Avery. I like the Bird Keepers. I don't even play the Rowlet, but the Bird Keepers are just really good to move stuff around and get like extra Mews off and stuff. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan for sure.
You gotta play the Rowlet though, bro. That's how you
Yeah.
you get through the just two V stars in play, right?
I mean, you can. You don't need to do that to get through two V stars. The rally can be nice. Yeah, you can set up a V or V star KO or KO a Sobble and just like make your prize trade different. But you don't need to get the KO, especially with Zacian in the deck as like a third attacker.
Sure.
Like you have enough options. I feel like most games.
I will say, looking at Dialga's win percentages on Limitless. Now, take this obviously with a bit of a grain of salt, but it's usually a pretty good indicator on just how general matchups go. Dialga versus Palkia Inteleon, win percentage 37%. Arceus Inteleon, 44%. Mew Genesect, 39%. Those
It is getting
that matchup
bodied.
spread is pretty bad. I think like if that was a true matchup spread, there's no shot I'm playing this deck to Worlds, right?
Yeah, I don't think I would either. I don't think that's quite Palkia or Dialga's matches. I think the deck is fairly hard to play to like get up to speed with like playing it consistently. It's definitely pretty tough. Yeah, I don't think that's quite Dialga's overall matchup percentages for sure. It's a little bit better than that.
Another deck that's popped up and gained a lot of popularity recently is the Ice Rider Calyrex. We've seen some like Ice Rider Bibarel decks. We've seen Ice Rider Palkia. We've seen Ice Rider Inteleon. Tons of different ways people are trying out the Ice Rider. So if you found yourself wanting to play the Ice Rider VMAX, which of kind of those three ways, like Ice Rider, I feel like it's like, are we cramming Palkia in there? Are we focusing mostly on Ice Rider? Is it just a thin Palkia? Kind of, where do you land on the Ice Rider? Or is it like just Ice Rider Inteleon maybe? What do you think?
I mean, that's been like the most staple one.
Right.
I like the B barrel build though. I do like the B barrel build a lot. I like the Ice Rider B barrel a lot. So if I had to pick one to play, I'm not going to be playing Ice Rider, because I don't think the deck is that good overall. I'd go with the B barrel. It's just it doesn't feel worse than Inteleon. It's just way more fun. That's how I feel about playing B barrel in general compared to Inteleon. It's like I'm winning the same amount of games, but I'm enjoying myself so much more playing B barrel than I am playing Inteleon. So why would I play Inteleon when I literally have like the same win percentages with these different decks? So yeah, I play the B barrel build. It's a cool deck. It's got some aggressive options, especially when you get the 2/2 Palkia line in there and you have the Greninja and everything. But the Italian one has definitely been the most successful overall, I would say for sure. But it doesn't feel like there's that much of a difference in as far as win percentage goes, which at the end of the day is the only thing that matters, right? It doesn't matter if Inteleon finds you the exact piece you need on a turn and you whiffed once as B barrel. If they both win the same number of games, who cares, right?
Yeah, and I think Ice Rider has definitely picked up a lot more play recently, but every single time, like ever since Chilling Reign came out, it's like I play this deck and then it has the same problems it always has. And so then it's like I forget about it for a while. New set comes out, meta develops. I'm like, okay, I'll try this deck again. Has the same problems it always had. Okay, we'll put it away. And that's kind of where I'm at with it once again. It's just like a little too inconsistent, being forced to play Melanie a little too often. You can mitigate that a little bit if you choose to play Palkia alongside it. And I think that's probably where I would lean the most, is including Palkia just to
Yeah.
use Star Portal to get those extra energies in place so you can be aggressive with boss's orders. Um,
It's funny
because
though that you
on
say that.
paper, yeah, go ahead.
It's like like the most popular build, I guess, with the B barrel Palkia. the BBR Palkia build at the very least. It's like the supporter you have the most of in there is Irida, so you're like using Palkia to use Irida for the
Right.
turn. Like if you look at Grant's build that he was that's the one that I mess around with the most. That he like was playing in some tournaments last week or whatever. It's like you're doing all this stuff, just use Irida for your turn, or Irida sets up your Palkia play, and so you're not using Melanie, you're just using Irida instead. But
Yeah, it's like a
but
different
it does feel
Irida
good.
or a different
Yeah.
Melanie. But it's like in theory, right? You do 280 damage, which KOs all the V stars, which is pretty
Yeah.
good. But it's just
Less
like
Mew.
it is so clunky to get to that point, right?
Yeah, way less Mew in the format, but even
Right.
then, I mean, yes, Mew's been getting a little bit of hype, a little bit of resurgence heading into Worlds. I feel like definitely, and I would not be surprised to see it, especially be played in day one. You know, make its way into day two, and definitely it'll definitely be there. Mew will be there for sure. It's not going to be a completely non-factor. I do think this is the best tournament ever to like choose to be like, all right, I'm gonna take the loss to Mew, and if I hit him, I hit him. If I don't, I'm chilling. Right. I think that's definitely like we're definitely in that spot in the meta heading into Worlds where you can like make that call and be like, I'll take this L to Mew and hope to hit the other matchups, right?
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if that makes Ice Rider good enough to play at Worlds. I don't think so, anyways. But let's move along to I guess the big ones. But like one prizes in general, the big ones, of course, being Reggie and uh you wrote it down here as Luna Rock. Is that what I call it?
Yeah, Lunatone and Soul Rock.
I forget what I usually call it.
Luna
Tone. I
Soul?
don't even know. Yeah, Luna Rock. No, Luna Rock makes sense now. But yeah, Reggie's and Luna Rock are like the big two big. Oh, I guess you Rapid Strike Malamar. If we just want to talk
Yeah,
one
or
prizers a little
Intellium
bit,
Box as well would be like another one prizer deck we could
yeah.
add in
If
this
we want to
section as
talk
well.
And Intellion Box definitely seems like the best of the one pricer decks. Because I don't think the Soul Rock Lunatone thing's very good.
No.
Reggie's has been out of the meta. Like it's not a deck. It's cool. It's fun. It does shows up in tournaments sometimes with decent placements. But on Pokestop, of course, is the Pokestop build now with it. But Rapid Strike Malamar, I feel like could. That's what Ross played at NAIC and top 32 or top 64, I think. But I mean, where do you stand on one prize decks right now?
I think I would probably rank them similarly to how you just ranked them. Maybe putting a little bit more emphasis on Reggie's. Like, I think that if we've got these Arceus decks that aren't playing Dunsparce, that creates a pretty good matchup for you. And if there's a lot of Arceus out there not playing Dunsparce, like that's a good field, ideally.
Yeah.
And then if you can just be consistent enough to just draw into the stones every single turn to one hit KO Palkias, I think that with Roxanne becoming much more popular, I don't think that Reggie does great against Roxanne, though it does thin pretty well with the Pokestops, like you mentioned. You can thin through your deck pretty efficiently, and you, of course, have a couple of extra cards you can draw with the Reggie Drago's ability. The deck is still a little clunky, I think, but I think I would probably go like Intellium Box, then Reggie's, then Malamar, and then down at the bottom, Lunatone Soul Rock.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I maybe I respect Malamar a little bit more, but still doesn't feel like it is a great deck. And then going into more of an unknown meta, you want to be going up against those two prize Pokemon consistently. And if you're not sure if you're gonna be able to do that, that definitely hurts Rapid Strike Malamar a little bit. But it doesn't have a target on its back like it did at one point. But maybe just the inconsistencies of having to like play the Manaphy constantly into play up against the Palkia decks, or even more decks that now play the Greninja like the Ice Rider is just going to be a little bit too much for it to keep up in the current meta, for sure.
So the deck that kind of took the European International Championships by storm was that Urshifu VMAX. Of course, Robin did win a regionals a few weeks before, but even after Robin won with Urshifu, it just was kind of not really on many people's radars going
Yeah.
into EUIC. And then all the top players played it. It absolutely dominated 5 out of the top 8 spots. And then, of course, Gustavo ended up defending his European Internationals title with Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. Are we at a point in the meta where things could cycle back around to Urshifu being solid again? You know, with these Arceus decks, they're not playing those hard counters like they started to after EUIC, the Hoopa Vs, the Manaphy's, the Dunsparces. You're probably only going to see one of those 3 cards and pretty much never the Hoopa at this point anymore.
Maybe. And I think like but if you do, I think you do have to make that call and like you have to build the deck more consistent to be able to compete with Arceus and
Palkia.
Palkia specifically, right? Like I don't think you can play the the Moltres, the Hoopa, the Dark Package stuff to give yourself a shot against Mew. I think you basically have to give up on the Mew matchup and be like, all right, I'm giving up on the Mew matchup, but I'm going to be a little bit more consistent, a little bit more straightforward. Have other options. The Yoga looping with the Blastoise, the Radiant Blastoise is super cool. Loop some Sobbles, loop some Manaphy's, whatever it might be. Be more consistent. Do more aggressive stuff that Urshifu can do. Urshifu is super powerful card, of course. Like uh, reason it fell off so hard is just because of Mew. And then Palkia came out, and it seemed like that was maybe also a struggle for Urshifu. But I mean, Palkia can't really one hit KO Urshifu, right? Like they can't really do that. It's not something they can really actually do. So, with that in mind, Urshifu definitely could be a solid choice. Like I said, if I was to build it right now, I'd build it with the idea of just like auto losing to Mew basically. But then trying to be as consistent so I can beat everything else. And with Mew being less popular, I definitely think there is room for Urshifu to definitely do well at Worlds for sure.
Yeah, the Radiant
I could even,
Blastoise. You'll go ahead.
I could even see like you still playing the dark stuff and still doing okay, but like it just
Sure.
feels so much harder to try and compete with Palkia specifically when your deck is that much more clunky.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like I think the obvious clear way to play it right now is with the Radiant Blastoise spreading that extra damage, trying to Yoga Loop the Manaphy and create the big like 3 prize turn where you're Yoga Loop KOing Manaphy plus targeting Sobbles and then Martying your opponent afterwards or something like that to kind of put Palkia in a tough spot. That's like a really strong setup. But I've wondered if over the Blastoise, maybe like you could build it as a kind of boxy deck with the Radiant Charizard and just have that. Like Charizard is just such a strong card. You can just be more aggressive in boss's orders after the Manaphy maybe, and if they don't get it back,
Yeah.
you still have your Gmax Rapid Flow, and then leave yourself with room with the Radiant Charizard to just take one hit KOs on the V Stars in the late game. I've thought I haven't put any testing into it personally, but I think the potential is definitely there for Urshifu. I agree with you. I think taking the loss to Mew is an okay path to go if you're Urshifu. You just got to roll the dice. I mean, honestly, to win Worlds, you got to get a little lucky anyway. You got to hit good matchups.
Yeah.
It's definitely got to be your day. But you got to pick a good deck and you got to play really well. So if you think you can roll that dice and there's a decent chance that you're not going to hit any of those terrible matchups for the way you've built your deck, I say go with it. I think it could do well.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's how I feel as well. Urshifu definitely seems like it has a shot for sure. Definitely it's just so good. It's such a good card. It's just been kind of under the radar for a while now.
Yes.
Um, up next, we got the I guess control deck of the format or whatever you want to call it, and that's of course Sanders Mewtwo Miltank, or I should say Mises Mewtwo Miltank, Mewtwo V Union Miltank deck, which has been fairly popular as of late. Like said after NIC, people definitely picked it up, played with it. Um, and I think it's still very much a solid deck. I think the deck is good. I think it's becoming a little bit harder for it with control decks in general. An unpredictable meta, like we're kind of getting into with Worlds, especially when your goal is to win the tournament, is really hard for control decks. Like they really like to take advantage of a predictable meta, which we saw Sander and Mies do so well at NAIC, right?
Right.
So I think it's going to be pretty tough for Mewtwo V and Miltank, to be honest. You don't know if the Arceus decks are going to have the quick shootings and how many choice belts and this and that or whatever. So, but what do you think? How much experience do you have against this deck since NASE?
Not a bunch. It's not something I did play against it in that Carolina Series tournament, and I've played it a few times on the ladder as well. But I was playing that Ninetales V, so kind of a cute little tech for the Mewtwo. My opponent put it in play, and then I was like, Ninetales, yeah, here you go. Here's your time to shine. And it definitely did what it was meant to in that instance. But actually looking at the Play Limitless page, I'm kind of surprised by these results, but maybe not so much just because I think that the Mewtwo Miltank deck is maybe it's not, as far as control decks go, it's not the hardest control deck to play, but it's still, people just aren't good at playing these types of decks. But if you look at its win percentage, it's 37% against Palkia Inteleon and 38% against Arceus Inteleon. And those are two pretty good matchups for the deck, I feel like, right?
No, yeah, those are definitely good matchups. I don't know if I've ever lost to a Palkia with the deck when I've played it. The Palkia matchup is pretty good. But yeah, decks like this, they're just different. I had someone ask me about, how do you play against this deck? Like they were playing, I forget what deck they were playing. Well, it's like that's going to be hard for people to figure out too, right? How to play against it. At least to the point, like up to the point of playing it optimally. But at the very least, you just have to swing and draw prize cards. So when your opponent doesn't know how to set up the Mewtwo and get it in play, or at least efficiently, then you just sitting there and swinging is going to beat them a majority of the time. That is actually really low. The Palkia matchup's really good.
I think
So
sometimes people get into a sense of like, or I guess as far as playing against these decks go, I think sometimes people overestimate how much time they have and think like, yeah, I can
yeah,
take things slow, I can slow things down. When in reality, you need to be aggressive. You need to start swinging as quickly as possible and like try to withhold as many resources as you can for the late game for like whatever the final strategy is. And maybe the part of the win percentage going down is like people have figured out kind of their keys to the matchup. If you just if they only get one Snorlax in play and you go knock it out plus Marnie, there's a decent chance that the Mewtwo Miltank deck's gonna struggle a little bit, right?
yeah.
So maybe just some of those things have led to its win percentage not being as high as it maybe really should be.
Yeah, definitely. That's a surprise. I didn't have expected that. It has not been doing great in online tournaments
No.
recently. Like I pay attention to a lot of the results of the online tournaments. I've not seen it up there very much as of late. I think the deck is still very good, but going into Worlds, I'm not as big of a fan of it. At least like but one thing I guess is like at least in the Masters division, the juniors and seniors division, I think is a little bit more predictable for the most part. Um, a little bit like maybe at the top end it won't be as predictable, but for the Master Division, I think it's pretty unpredictable. And that's why like you want to be one of those people who are also being unpredictable, right? You don't just want to show up with one of the decks that everyone expects. And I think the unpredictability just hurts control decks. And the Mewtwo at the end of the day, even though you can draw 6 prize cards in the game, it is a control deck with the way it functions in the Pokemon trading card game. So it is a control deck at the end of the day, and unpredictability is not good for control decks. So not looking great for it, I don't think overall.
And the final deck that we have to talk about, there are obviously a few other ones here that, could be decent as well, that we're not going to spend much time on them. But the final one we will talk about specifically is Stone Joiner. So this is a deck that is really good at beating the top two decks. I think it's pretty solid against Palkia. It's pretty heavily favored against Palkia. If Arceus Inteleon does not play Dunsparce, it's a very good matchup. And even if they have the Dunsparce, it's a pretty good matchup. But against the rest of the field is not great, I don't think.
Yeah, and that is kind of the problem with the deck. And even then, like, yeah, especially with like stuff like Ice Rider and Dialga, like those kind of decks. Yeah, the off meta decks are just tough for Stone Journer. And one of the questions we actually got on Twitter was from Johnny Juicebox One. Better way to play Stone Journer: classic version with Energy Nile or Evolution Incense, such consistency route. Azul has been trying out. I definitely like the overall consistency route. The Energy Denial version was basically okay. I'm gonna play Crushing Hammer and Flannery in my deck to still lose to Mew. So it's the only matchup they were really good against, and you still lost to Mew anyways. So why play them to begin with is kind of especially with Mew kind of going down in popularity. It was kind of like, okay, if you were, a couple formats ago, it's like, okay, if you really want to play Stonejourner, you got to play the Energy now to sometimes squeak out a couple games against Mew. But in the current meta, Mew being way less popular, and it's still just being a bad matchup, no matter what, even if you play the Flanneries and the Crushing Hammer, I just say, got the Energy Denial, be more consistent against the Arcantel and the Palkia, because you could, if you draw poorly, you can still lose to those matchups. They're favorable, but they're not auto wins, I would say, by any means. But I think the rate, once again, it's another deck that kind of thrives off predictability of the meta, and I think there's just too much unpredictability to have Stone Journey be a good call going into Worlds.
Yeah, in a super narrow meta, if you only expect the top two decks, Palkia Inteleon and Arceus Inteleon, Stonejourner is the best imaginable play. And that's reflected here in the Limitless results. It's got a 69% nice win percentage against Palkia Inteleon, a 52% win percentage against Arceus Inteleon. I'd maybe expect that to be slightly higher. And then against
Yeah.
Arceus Flying Pikachu, it's 76%, which is its best matchup, it seems. But if you look at every other matchup, it is just abysmal. 30% against Mew Genesect, 28% against Arceus Duraludon, 21% against Dialga, 33 versus Lunatone Solrock, and then Calyrex Inteleon is 26% win percentage. So, I mean, if you are so confident that the meta is going to be just those two decks, Stonejourner is the best imaginable play. But
Yeah.
you and I don't think that the meta is going to be that defined as far as like just
Nope.
I shouldn't say defined. It's not going to be that narrow to those two decks. It's going to be much more diverse.
Yeah, day one you might be able to squeak through. I think the meta will be higher counts of the decks in day one. But once you get to day 2, I think it's gonna be a lot of stuff. There's just gonna be a lot of different decks being played. I'm actually pretty excited to see what everyone actually ends up coming up with, and I hope I'm not disappointed. Because I feel like the last Worlds we had 2019 was really predictable, and there was just a lot of Malamar, and Malamar was not very good, but there was a lot of Malamar.
Yeah, that one's a
So
little different because there was like no meta really. There was a huge question mark there because
yeah,
no online
you
tournaments
said
and a rotation plus a new set, right? Like huge amount of question marks going into that Worlds. Um, and so I think that one's like maybe a little bit different. And honestly, Malamar I think was better than it was represented at that Worlds because we ended up playing Malamar. I just farmed cups with Malamar, Grant and I, like through our area. Like we played it so much, and that's just kind of something that goes through with the, more time and like as a meta develops, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, a lot of them were still playing Ultra Necrozma for some reason, so that was part of
yes,
the that
yes.
was part of the issue for Malamar's
Tina, I
results
could
at
excuse. Tina is
2019.
like okay, but Espeon
Yeah,
Deoxys is like the broken card in that deck.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
for sure.
finally, yeah, we're not talking about the World's 2019 meta. We're talking about World's 2022. Last little question here. I know this episode is super long, so I really appreciate everyone sticking with us. I hope there's been good information for our World's competitors who are listening. But the last question for this week, once again, we will be having more questions next week, so please ask them to us here on YouTube or over on Twitter. Comes from Brennan Camerman over on Twitter, who asks, what rogue deck is most likely to go far? So we kind of identified the top 3 decks being Arceus Inteleon, Palkia Inteleon, and Mew VMAX. So, I mean, I guess like several other things below that wouldn't necessarily be considered rogue, but what rogue deck,
Yeah.
Azul, would you pick? Maybe tier 3 or lower deck that has a chance to make top 8 potentially.
It's actually weird because yeah, people like I've had the discussion about what does rogue mean before, like on my stream and stuff, and people like the general conclusion seems to be like a deck can't be rogue if it's known. Um,
Sure.
so theoretically, we couldn't predict it at all if we pick a known deck.
Sure.
But we could pick unpredictable, I guess. Like, I mean, I think some kind of like, I mean, I would love to see. Oh, I guess it's pretty rogue, like some kind of Zoro box. I haven't been able to make Zoro
Sure.
box work.
Yeah.
It got slow, bro, though. Like, so I Zoro box would be my pick. I think for sure.
Cleavor, Zorobox
No, I don't know about
Cleavor.
that. I don't know about Cleavor, but Zorobox, that deck is always a ton of fun. But it does feel like it comes up just a little bit short, even despite the addition of the Slowbro. So I'm go with Slowbro or Zorobox.
Yeah, I think that's definitely because that's one that like someone could show up with it and it'll be built in a way that like we haven't seen it all online,
Yeah, there's a lot
right?
of options. A lot of options for sure.
And I probably would just have to lean that way with you. I mean, I think there's always a chance like we saw some kind of unique Flaffy decks pop up at a couple of the regionals this year, like a one prizer Flaffy deck. Raichu V, I think, is an insanely hard hitting card that people shouldn't sleep on. And obviously, the best deck in the format is weak to lightning. So there's always a chance someone shows up with something like that that could do decently. But I probably, you know, mostly just picking that for the sake of picking something that's not Zorobox because I think that is a pretty good a good answer. But I think with that, that is going to conclude our episode this week. Over an hour and 50 minutes, our longest episode ever. So I really appreciate everyone sticking with us. We really don't want these episodes to be this long, but sometimes we just get to talking, and hopefully the discussion was good and you stuck with us through it all. I do appreciate the love and support as always. Please be sure to leave a like here on the YouTube channel if you enjoyed, or leave us a rating over on your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also follow us on social media. The podcast is at uncommon_energy, myself at Trainer Chip, and Azul at Azul_GG. Azul's going to be competing at Worlds in just a week and a half. Super excited. We'll be rooting him on for sure. And yeah, thank you everyone so much for listening. Azul, anything else to add?
Yeah, appreciate y'all sticking around for the almost 2-hour cast. Remember, questions at us on Twitter or in the comment section here on the YouTube channel for next week's episodes, anything Worlds related or close to it. And then check out the survey as well that we mentioned earlier as
Definitely.
well. Give your feedback to PTCG Live so they can hopefully improve and come out with a good product at the end of this whole beta fiasco thing going on. So The link to the survey will be in the description, so go check it out there, and make sure you put your opinion in if you did have a chance to play PTCG Live. That's gonna do it for me. Thanks for the support as always, and we'll catch you all next week. Peace.